Okay, there we go. That microphone's working fantastically. We might just make a start. Sorry to those who are still filtering in. Grab a seat. There's still a few up the front. Fantastic. Look, thank you all very much for coming this evening. My name's Sarah Hegarty. I'm the co-convenor of Lighter Footprints, and I'm very thrilled to welcome everyone tonight. I'd like to kick us off by acknowledging that this evening's proceedings are taking place on the unceded sovereign land of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people. We're deeply indebted to their elders past, present and emerging, and to all of their people for their care for country over millennia. And as we meet tonight to consider how we can best continue to care for this country into the future, it's important to keep that consideration in mind. I'd also like to extend a very special thanks to our guests of honour for this evening. We're extremely pleased to welcome Tim Buckley, all the way from Sydney. Tim is the founder and director of the independent, non-partisan think tank Climate Energy Finance, which works pro bono in the public interest to accelerate Australia's transition to net zero in line with the climate science. A very admirable calling, if I may say so. Fantastic. Tim is an international expert on the global energy transition and has authored over 100 reports, including on the roles of finance and policy in accelerating decarbonisation. He's joined this evening by the federal member for Kooyong, where we're meeting tonight, Dr. Monique Ryan. As many of you will know, Dr. Ryan was first elected to Kooyong in 2022 with climate action as a core policy position. Since then, she's continually advocated for stronger energy transition policy in Australia at the federal level. So we're privileged to have two such experts here to speak with us tonight, discussing a topic that it's fair to say 2026 has really brought to the fore of the policy debate. That's around Australia's energy independence and energy security. For this evening, we will first hear from Tim, speaking to the international context of Australia's energy security. Then Dr. Ryan will speak to us about the challenges and opportunities from a federal parliament perspective before joining Tim in conversation. We will close out the night with plenty of time for audience Q&A. So for that one, you're invited to submit any questions that you may have via Slido. You've hopefully met this app before, but if not, you can... Oops. There we are. You can head to slido.com, as you see up on the slide there. Enter the ID number 7179748, and you'll see a Q&A section where you can write in the question that's burning in your mind. The other thing you can do is click a thumbs up on any questions that you would like to see answered. That's going to help our panel make sure the most popular questions are prioritised first. So please head to slido.com. You can also find that via QR code and web address on the agenda on your seat. Pop your questions into the Q&A and we'll get to them towards the end of the evening. But that's it from me, so I'll welcome Tim Buckley to speak to us now.
Thanks, Sarah, and good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure, privilege to be here tonight, and I'm going to just limit your, test your patience just for 10, 12 minutes. I'll present on some slides and then we'll get to the more interesting stuff with Dr. Monique Ryan and then question and answer, as was just pointed out. But I laughed when I was described as non-partisan. My comment to Monique, I'm very partisan. I'll work with any politician that accepts and acts on the climate science. I do work with Liberal MPs. I'm from Sydney. Fortunately, we've got a couple that accept and act very aggressively on the climate science in New South Wales Parliament. So New South Wales has multi-party support for aggressive action on climate science. And so, yeah, I am partisan in that regard. I won't bother wasting my time trying to talk to someone who is paid to ignore the science and ignore intergenerational equity. But enough of the politics, we'll leave that to Monique. But everything I do is predicated. I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer, I'm a reformed investment banker, or reforming investment banker, but I talk to what the insurance industry has been telling us for 40, 45, 50 years is happening, and at the end of the day, the smartest actuaries in the world stand by what the scientists are telling us, and that is that we've now had 12 of the 12 hottest years in record, and I accept that. We're also a public interest think tank, as Sarah mentioned. We have no government funding, no corporate funding, we do no paid advisory, and I'm not paid by the Chinese government either, but I am going to challenge your thinking. If you haven't heard me talk before, I will talk very positively about China. It's where I actually get my inspiration from. At the end of the day, the climate science is clear, it is a climate crisis, but we do have the solutions at the scale and at the costs and at the technology readiness to solve for the climate science. We just need other countries to emulate what China's already doing. And I'll get into that in a minute. But I am from finance. I do look at things from a finance perspective. The world invested last year, according to the Bloomberg New Energy Finance, $2.3 trillion was invested in decarbonisation, electrification of our energy system around the world. 2.3 trillion is a lot of money. It is growing. It's been growing for the last decade, and it is double the investment, the expenditure. I don't like calling investing or in buying oil every day or buying coal, the fuel to run your coal plant. That's not an investment, that's an expense, whereas this is an investment each and every year in wind, solar, batteries, EVs, grid. Now, Bloomberg estimates that if we're to solve for the climate science, the world needs to double or triple the amount of annual investment. So we need to be spending 5, 6, 7 trillion US dollars each and every year. The money is absolutely there. I'm from finance. If you have the right price signal, if you have the right incentives, finance can solve for this. And we can do it using technologies that exist today, thanks to China, as I mentioned. So just to reinforce why I'm saying that about China, I know they're a totalitarian state. I know democracy is a totally flawed form of government, but it's far better than any other type of government. So I spend my time volunteering as for community independence, because I think democracy is really, really important. But where our democracy is failing is that our politicians at the federal level have to get re-elected every 2.5, 3 years. China doesn't have that problem. They're a benevolent dictatorship. They have clarity of where they're going for the next 10, 20 years. You can read it in their 5-year plans, and they deliver on it. They don't have to worry about debate. Now, when you're investing in 50 and 100-year timeframes for infrastructure, that's the way you get stuff done. If you allow democracy to get in the way, it's a lot harder. And I'll leave the politics there, but at the end of the day, put aside, I accept what they are. I accept they have plenty of problems, but so does Australia. So when I look at China, and I've been studying and investing in China for 20 years, I started investing in global clean tech solutions 20 years ago. We're investing in Europe, in America, and by the time we'd finished 2 or 3 years of investing, we had a quarter of the portfolio in China, and it was because China was already 20 years ago leading the world. And what the company CEOs were telling me each and every day, every time I met with them, it was profound back then, and 20 years later they've exceeded every target they set. So looking at the global world, the world last year invested huge amounts of renewables, but the chart on the right is China. And that's to scale. China is 2/3 of the world's investment in renewable energy last year. Now, this would be totally off track if it wasn't for China when it comes to wind and solar. It is unbelievable the scale of what China is doing, and the only way you can do it is actually go and see it firsthand. I'd love all of our politicians at the federal level to go to China and actually see it, because it's the only way you can really believe it, that it is absolutely a national mission for China to dominate every zero emissions industry of the future. Now, domination is a strong word, but that's what they do. Now, that's got geopolitical problems. But let's bear in mind, they're our number one trade partner. So do we really want to fight with our number one trade partner, or do we want to embrace and work with them and collaborate with them? But regardless of what we do, they're going to move, they're going to decarbonise, and if anything, Trump's war on Iran has reinforced their 20-year strategy is absolutely on the money. It's all about energy security, energy independence, and industry dominance, and investment, and jobs, and exports, and saving the planet, and air pollution. It's all of those things. But self-interest is a powerful motive, and China's absolutely shown it for 20 years. Just a couple of charts. China is red in this one. This is the IEA. This is China dominating the world in terms of electric vehicle sales. Dominating the world. So sure, they're the number one exporter of EVs in the world, but they also are the number one buyer of EVs in the world. They've got the best charging infrastructure. They've got the best battery swapping technology. Now sure, their population density is multiples of Australia's. We need Australian solutions for Australian problems. They don't have that problem. They've got a high population density, so they're leading the world, and they're doing it at China speed, China scale. But red is China. The rest of the world is less than what China is doing, one country. This is batteries, my favourite topic at the moment, because batteries are turbocharging solar. And this is a chart showing who installed energy storage systems, the most in the world in 2025, China. The battery installs in the world are going to double, double and double again. We can see that. We all know it in Australia thanks to the home battery scheme. There's been a huge success for the rich half of Australia and a huge success for energy prices in the middle of a war in the Middle East. But look at the red. This is going to be wrong because everyone underestimates what China does, but China's forecast to be 50% of the world's battery installs each and every year, and they're going to grow at 50% per annum each and every year. Again, I use the word domination. This is from McKinsey at the start of this year. This is China. China is the dark blue. Should be red, but it's dark blue, and they dominate the entire battery supply chain from mining, processing, refining, to cathodes, to anodes, to cells. I often get asked about recycling. China does 80% of the world's battery recycling today. Don't take my word for it, take McKinsey. 80% of the world. Europe's actually banning the export of black mass, battery recycling material, because they want to develop their own recycling industry, but China's paying too much for European black mass. China dominates the world, but again, think about it from Australia's perspective. China is trying to diversify away from their over-reliance on Australian critical minerals, because Australia is not a military ally of China. China feels vulnerable to Australia. But anyone that thinks of China as being really low ESG standards, no country's perfect, I get that, but China's the biggest recycler in the world. They're the biggest scrap recycler in the world. They've got more electric arc furnaces than America. They are leading this, and they're doing it for national security, national independence. But that is a domination strategy. Plenty of downsides. We could talk about that in Q&A if you like, but that is China investing in saving the planet and dominating the industries of the future. That's McKinsey. Don't take my word for it. Who's the biggest beneficiary of Trump's invasion of Iran? It was meant to undermine China. Why? Because America's the biggest fossil fuel producer in the world. Trump cheered the day he invaded Iran because he pushed up the price of oil, and Exxon and Mobil and Chevron made a huge amount of extra profits, like triple the profits overnight thanks to Trump's invasion of... Who funded Trump? Okay, let's not go into America. It wasn't very well thought through, of course, it was Trump, but China's the biggest beneficiary. China's now exporting $25 billion a month of batteries, solar and EVs. Right? China EV sales, I did a post on it yesterday, BYD's EV sales in May were up 80% year on year. The top 4 EV exporters in China are up 50 to 80% year on year in the month of May. And this is solar and batteries combined. So this is Ember tracking the data on a monthly basis. And so China exports more clean tech than America does export fossil fuels. So the beauty of this is that China is sharing its gift to the world, and everyone's now embracing it other than America because of what America's done to the Middle East and done to fossil fuel prices. I think you get the point. I'll now move to Australia. Australia, we are a laggard in many respects. No surprise, we're the third largest fossil fuel export nation in the world. Woodside, Santos, Chevron, Exxon, Impex of Japan, they don't want Australia to move and embrace decarbonisation, but the good news is we're doing it anyway, and in some respects we are a world leader, and we need to accelerate that, and that's why Lighter Footprints is doing exactly the right thing. We need to talk about the opportunities, how Australia can lead the world. We do lead the world in many of these areas. We're a laggard in other areas, and it's bloody hard to get anything approved in this country, particularly renewable energy or grid, but despite all of that, we are actually a world leader. So in this chart's about batteries. Australia led the world with the Tesla Hornsdale battery reserve down in South Australia. That was only 8 years ago. That was the biggest battery in the world by a mile, and it was 100 megawatt hours, 128 megawatt hours. Now, that's a rounding error compared to the 10 biggest batteries Australia's building concurrently right now, which are all in the gigawatt hours. 2, 3, I think we just turned on a 2.8 gigawatt hour battery up in my neck of the woods in Waratah Big Battery. It was called the Waratah Super Battery because it was the biggest battery in the world when it was announced, but now we're building 10 of them at the same time, all as big. But what this chart is also showing is that, and I mean, you only have to read the AFR today, the CEO of Snowy Hydro was saying Angus Taylor approved a diesel-fired gas peaking power plant for Snowy about 6 years ago, and now the CEO of Snowy doesn't want to turn it on because A, it runs on diesel, and diesel's bloody expensive, let alone the emissions. B, there's no gas connection because Angus didn't worry about the gas. But C, he goes, I'd be losing money if I turned it on. I don't really want to turn it on. That's the AFR today, he admits that. Why? Because 8 years ago, when the Tesla Hornsdale battery reserve was turned on, it was a 1-hour battery. Australia is currently running 2-hour batteries, but all the big batteries being built today are 4 hours in Australia. So within 2 years, they'll all be operational, and the average duration will be 4 hours. So that's right, the sun sets predictably almost every day, but we can now get 4 hours of battery into the evening peak if you don't own your own home and have a home battery, thanks to Chris Bowen. But Australia and New South Wales, my energy minister, and she's had plenty of rocks from me, but she's leading the world. Penny Sharp is leading the world, rolling out 8-hour, 10-hour, 12-hour battery durations with private industry, thanks to New South Wales leadership. It's the first state in the world to be doing 10 to 12-hour batteries, 8 to 10 hours. And we're leading the world. But I'll wrap it up. Again, home battery scheme, in 11 months, we've done 11.4 gigawatt hours. This is beyond anything even Minister Bowen thought was possible. Australians are voting with their own dollars, but as I think a lot of the discussion tonight is about, we need to make sure we bring 100% of Australia along, not just the top half that owns your own home and doesn't live in an apartment and doesn't rent or doesn't live in public housing. Right? This home battery scheme is very biased towards the top half, including me. I own my own home. Of course, I'm an investment banker. I've got a big battery thanks to Minister Bowen, but it's my children who are all renting. It's all of your children who are renting. And we need to solve it for them. So why I do emphasise this chart is even the AFR had to recognise that record batteries are today driving down power prices materially. The AFR, the Australian Fossil Fuel Review, having to recognise that batteries are driving deflation for renters, for everyone in Australia. The trickle down, we've got to make sure there are more specific programs to solve for renters and apartment dwellers and strata, but this is working. The trickle down occasionally works. This one is working for everyone. We've seen that in the default market offer. On the 1st of July, your prices across Victoria down 3 to 5%. And I'll emphasise down 3 to 5% in the middle of another fossil fuel war in the Middle East. 2022, Putin invaded Ukraine. Coal prices went through the roof, gas prices went through the roof, oil prices went through the roof, Australian energy prices went through the roof, Australian electricity prices went through the roof. Fast forward 4 years, our electricity prices, our gas prices are down. We are actually getting there, and the difference is renewable energy and batteries. And for once, the gas cartel is actually worrying about Minister Bowen's gas reserve. He's got a bloody big stick, and for once they're acting sensibly. First time in 12 years. That's why they are a cartel, but anyway, we'll move on. Our final point, we've got the safeguard mechanism review. Australia 12 years ago had the right policy. We led the world. We had a big carbon price. Tony Abbott rejoiced about removing it. We have a carbon price by stealth. It's called the safeguard mechanism. It's the ACCU, the Australian Carbon Credit Unit. We need carbon pricing. And if you don't do it because you don't think Australia needs it, know that China is moving at world leadership in carbon pricing. They've just expanded the world's biggest emissions trading scheme. It's China. They've expanded it by 50%. That'll be fully implemented by the end of next year. They're getting ready so that China can continue to export to Europe, because Europe's now got a carbon border adjustment mechanism, and China wants to keep trading with the rest of the world other than America, and so they're going to respond. They are driving this. They're the best position to do it. And who's our number one trade partner? It's China. We want to actually supply what they want in a decade's time, not what they're buying today. And they believe on decarbonisation. Their whole economy is geared to it. We need to align with our economic interest, our export interests. We need a price on carbon domestically so that we can prepare when China implements a price on carbon in either China or Japan, Korea, Vietnam, Thailand jump on board and it becomes an Asian price on carbon. We're a long way from it, but the Safeguard Mechanism review is a key policy initiative. We've got to give the government more spine, and that's what our independents will do, to make sure that we lift the quality of the emissions trading scheme we've got, which is the fourth best solution. It's a safeguard mechanism, but it's moving us in the right direction so that we're aligning with our key trade partners. Thank you.
That is just fantastic. Thank you so much, Tim. Now, if you'll join me in welcoming our federal member, Dr. Monique Ryan.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Jenny, and all from Lighter Footprints for the opportunity to join you this evening and to speak with Tim. It's a great honour. Let me also acknowledge the traditional owners, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and mark our respect for their ongoing connection to land, to sea and to country in this very beautiful part of the world. So it's a great pleasure always to be here, and these seats have special significance for me, which some of you will be aware of. This beautiful hall has been the home of some of my more memorable moments in the last 3 or 4 years. My role tonight, I think, is to provide the, political counterpoint to Tim's extraordinary knowledge of the energy sector, and to give you a bit of a background, to what seems to be going on in Canberra at the moment, and the background to the ongoing struggle for energy security, energy resilience, energy independence that we have as a nation. So I've just come back from a fortnight in Canberra. Many of you will know that the budget was handed down 3 weeks ago, and there was very little actually in it around climate or the environment in particular. A sort of startlingly small amount on environment and on biodiversity and all the things that we might have thought a couple of years ago that we would be talking about in 2026. To a very significant extent, the setting of the budget was changed by the war in the Middle East and the ongoing uncertainties around that. And as a federal politician, as an independent, one of the things that I'm always struck by is the extent to which every gain that we make as a community, as a society, as a country, is hard fought and then has to be very much protected. You think you've won a war, you think you've won a discussion. Some of you might remember that on the election night 2022, Zoe Daniels said the climate wars are over. No. It's been very clear that that's not the case. Wasn't the case then, it hasn't been the case since. And events like the American war with Iran have brought that into focus. But there's always, as Tim has said, a bit of an ongoing fight between our government and those who believe in the immutability of climate change and the need to respond to it and adapt to it, and those who will always seek to discount that fight. So in the last 2 weeks in Canberra, we haven't been talking about climate change, or we haven't been talking about the environment. We've been talking about the NDIS, and we've been talking about taxation and the need to take away from Australians necessary supports like those provided through the NDIS, because we can't afford to provide them. We haven't been talking about the need to tax oil and gas, as more than 3 million Australians told the government they wanted it to do prior to the budget, because that's just not something that the government is able or willing to come to grips with right now, and that has remained an ongoing front, I would say, in the ongoing battle to hold the government to account on its action on energy resilience and on a reasonable budgetary return on our national resources and the extent to which they're being taken advantage of by multinationals. So I think many of us felt that the budget that we've just discussed and the tax bills that we've just passed in the last week were a massive disappointment, a wasted opportunity, and a signal, I guess, to the community as to where our government's priorities lie at this point in time. I do think that that's not the end of the battle. The battle to appropriately tax our oil and gas resources will continue. I think that there will be movement on it before this term of Parliament ends, but it's going to be a struggle, and it's going to be something that independents and members of parties like the Greens are going to have to continue to fight for. There were some things in the budget which were positive. If we talk about electric vehicles and the need to increase availability and affordability of EVs, the government did decide under some pretty sustained pressure to continue the FBT tax exemption until March of 2027, after which time it will be limited and it will be limited to cheaper EVs and will remain in place until April 2029. It was possibly the worst possible time for us to look at removing supports for electric vehicles, and it was certainly something I was advocating for pretty strongly, the continuation of the FBT tax exemption. We've seen in other jurisdictions when it's been removed, New Zealand and the UK, the best examples of that EV sales have tanked, and it seemed like the worst possible time to be removing those sorts of carrots from the market. The government has also made significant commitments in terms of extending EV infrastructure, charging infrastructure for small and large vehicles, which is a positive, and it's put significant investment into charging infrastructure on things like the Hume Highway for commercial vehicles, which is good. And it's extended its funding for active transport, growing a fund which was $100 million to a fund which is now $500 million for over the next 4 years. And where, as a team, my team, our community has been advocating pretty strongly for some of that funding to go towards the Hawthorn to Box Hill active transport trail, which is something which has been on the horizon for our community for a long, long time. increasing signals that it might, some funding for that, which would likely operate in a partnership with the Victorian State Government, may be forthcoming in the next 2 or 3 years, and we'll continue to work on that. We didn't see any changes to the petroleum resources rent tax or the settings around that. Just reminding you, as many of you will know, that it will generate half of the revenue of our excise from beer by the end of this decade, and that by 2026 we will be collecting more money from indexation, so interest on HEX debts, than we will be from what is supposed to be our flagship petroleum resources rent tax. It's a huge disappointment of a rental tax that is not fit for purpose and probably can't be salvaged. But the government has signalled that it's not willing to move on that. The government also, as you know, provided a 60% reduction on the fuel excise for a 3-month period. That's about in the worst phase of the uncertainty around the war in Iran. That will expire on the 1st of July, and we haven't seen any indication that that will be continued. I don't see that it should be, given that petrol is now cheaper than it was at the start of the war. The government has, however, continued to fund the diesel fuel rebate, which is funding some of our biggest fossil fuel polluters to a total of $11 billion. At least 4.7 of that goes to the 20 big mining companies per year, and has signalled that it has no intention of unwinding that rebate. That is an ongoing struggle that I think, again, it could be fertile territory in the next couple of years, certainly leading up to the next federal election, because it's paradoxical that we continue to subsidise the mining industry and some of the big fossil fuel companies to use fossil fuels. It's insane. The other thing that was missing from the budget this year really were really strong signals to help with electrification of rental homes. So the government, as Tim has alluded to, has extended the battery rebates, and that extension and that funding has been game-changing. And we can argue about whether it's a good way to spend that money, but the fact is that 1 in 25 Australian homes has got a battery in the last 12 months, just from that scheme itself. 415,000 homes since July 2025, which I think if Chris Bowen's done nothing else, he can point to that as a significant achievement. But we do have a situation where renters are not benefiting from batteries, home batteries and solar to the same extent, and the subsidies which are in place for them are pretty limited. Things like the 3-hour-a-day solar sharer program, there's some concerns about the integrity of that program and the extent to which decreases in home electricity prices are being passed on to consumers. My team and other independents are continuing to work with groups within the community with alternative plans. Last week I hosted Solar Citizens in Canberra, talking about ways in which we can provide incentives for landlords to add solar and batteries to rental properties to bring down the costs of electricity for those homes. The other thing, which is, I think, ongoing missing piece of the puzzle, which has been difficult to get the government to engage with for obvious reasons, is insulation and other changes to improve the energy efficiency of Australian homes, which remains an ongoing problem. We have an opposition which wants to decrease the ratings for new homes in this country and their energy efficiency. So, as I said earlier, it's an ongoing war. Things that will be coming up will, as Tim alluded to, in the rest of this year will be the review of the safeguard mechanism. So when we think of that as being the federal government's most significant initiative for cutting industrial emissions, it's a really important piece. and we have this mandatory review in the second half of this year. It's probably going to be announced next month. The question is whether it can be extended in an effective way or whether we should remove it with another alternative means of decreasing emissions and funding, taxing carbon effectively. Many of you would have been at the event that we had here a couple of months ago with Rod Sims, where we were talking about alternative means of pricing carbon, decreasing emissions and capturing smaller emitters which aren't currently captured under the safeguard mechanism. So something like Rod's polluter pays mechanism or other ways of doing a similar sort of a thing, I think remain very much on will remain at the forefront of energy policy in the next 6 months. I'll just finish by saying that all of these things happen as if we go back to Tim's very first slide in the context of a heating planet. All of the predictions that we have for next summer is that we will have a Super El-Nino event. And unfortunately, I guess sometimes it takes those sorts of things to focus the mind of people because it is an ongoing struggle to bring climate and environment to the forefront in the middle of a cost of living crisis, a crisis of home affordability and availability, young people dealing with intergenerational inequity, a tax system that's stacked against them, HEX debts, and then climate. I was on TV this afternoon on Afternoon Briefing, and Patricia Carvelis asked me why people were less happy now than they were in 2020, which I found to be a very somewhat discombobulating question because it was a bit unexpected. But it is a time of great uncertainty and anxiety, and a time where people don't want to talk about the difficult and tough questions. Again, this morning I had constituent meetings, and a constituent who came in said to me that within 2 years we will be engaged in military conflict with China, which I'm not sure that I agree with him, but I think it is a time when people feel besieged, either because of economic pressures or because of the many other pressures that we're facing as a society, and a time where constructive and respectful dialogue is not front of mind for our nation's leaders or for many of the people who are driving the conversations that we're having as a country. So it's a very challenging time, and there's much to do. I think we can look at all of those lovely figures that Tim showed us about what China is doing, and we can try to emulate them. And we can look at the extraordinary successes of things like the battery scheme, but we do have very significant challenges ahead of us as a country, and it's a great privilege to live in the sort of community where we can discuss those challenges respectfully and constructively. And on that note, Tim, would you like to come and join me up here? So I think we're going to have questions and answers from me for a few minutes, and then we'll move on to your own. So please don't forget the Slido. So slido.com. If anyone's got any issues with that, I'm sure the person next to you will tell you how to do it. Now, Tim, I'm going to ask you some questions. Self-sufficiency in transport. What are the things that we need to do, the big things, the big challenges that you think that we need to have in terms of getting off fossil fuels in our transport industry? 20% of our emissions 19 or 20% of our emissions come from transport. It's been one of the sectors that we've struggled with in the past. Things have perhaps changed a bit in the last 12 months or so. What do you think we need to do there?
You touched on the stupidity of us subsidising our addiction to imported diesel. My words, not yours, but Why are we subsidising imported diesel? It just, to me, makes no sense. Now, we could haggle over whether it's a subsidy or not. The OECD says it is. At the end of the day, we need to decarbonise our mining sector, our freight sector, and we need to decarbonise our transport passenger vehicle sector. We, as a nation, waste $50 billion a year buying oil and diesel and aviation fuel from the Middle East. Now, it might come via Singapore or Malaysia or Japan, but it's coming from the Middle East. So $50 billion a year, and now we have been subsidising it for 60 years. I just think we've got to get off that addiction. Let's do what China's doing. China's doing it for national self-interest. It's to get off their addiction to imported oil because they know America can cut their sea lanes. They've known that for decades. America's military, their navy is far bigger than China, and China knows that they're dependent on oil. Well, we've got the same dependence. It's an economic dependence, but put $50 billion, like Saul Griffith talks about, like put that back into your local community. That would be $50 billion a year we could spend on investment, jobs in regional Australia, solar on every building, solar on every warehouse, electric vehicles, and we could get off that addiction. But we need to do it in all three: mining, freight, and I mean the government, as you said, this budget was all about their concern of cost of living and the inflationary impacts of our addiction to imported oil. That's one of the reasons they couldn't act on some of the initiatives that you and I wanted, that you spoke to, because ultimately they were worried about the inflationary impact. If diesel prices have just gone up 50%, therefore our freight costs have gone up. And our farmers, like I was reading this morning, farmers' fertiliser costs are up 30%. Fertiliser, urea, is a fossil fuel. We import most of it, and it's gone up 30%. So our farmers are getting it in the neck. The cost of groceries is going up. The cost of delivering the groceries to the cities has gone up. That's what changed in Chalmers' mind when Trump invaded the latest invasion, Iran, and the oil price went through the roof, the diesel price went through the roof, and we suffered hyperinflation. So we've got to get off our addiction, but it's not just passenger vehicles. We can do it in passenger vehicles. We've got to do it in freight. We've got to change the rules. We've got to nationalise the rules so that we have one set of rules for all trucks because they go over the borders of all the states. We are a federation. I think there's merit in that sometimes, but we're a small country with a lot of rules. So one thing that was in the federal budget was the idea of actually trying to get 8 sets of rules at the state and territory level and uniform them, make them uniform nationally. So we're shuffling in the right direction, but we've got to go at China speed or a resemblance of that. We've got to lead in mining. We've got the world's biggest mining sector. We've got two of the 2 biggest mining companies, supposedly Australian, yet they're doing next to nothing. And in fact, BHP, as the ABC Four Corners showed, have walked back their commitments. Rio's not doing anything else in the Pilbara. They're doing it in aluminium in Eastern Australia, but they're not doing it in the Pilbara. So I want the 2 biggest mining companies in the world to actually play like they're Australian. They're using Australia's public resources. I want them to invest in infrastructure that gets off our addiction to imported oil. 60% of BHP's energy comes from diesel, from imported diesel from the Middle East. They should be using this war as a reminder to get off their addiction. Instead, they're lobbying. They threatened our Prime Minister with a $25 million advertising campaign if he touched the diesel fuel rebate. That's why Albo backed down, because the last time the Minerals Council threatened the Prime Minister, they got rid of the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's been through Canberra Airport recently, but it's extraordinary the amount of you walk into that, come off the plane and walk into the airport, and everywhere you look, there's ads for fossil fuel. Apparently, it's natural gas, so that's fine. But and massive signs. It's actually quite dystopian all around our nation's capital. They've gone hard with the advertising, and it's pretty clear that the pressure is there. What about the transmission infrastructure? Because the government, that does seem to be the thing that Chris Broman's really struggle with the regulatory red tape and just the social licence for those projects. What can we do? Because that does seem to be something that's really holding up progress quite significantly.
It has been weaponised, in my view, by the opposition, the climate deniers. But at the end of the day, do farmers want to lose big tracts of their land to transmission towers? Well, if they're compensated fairly, I think they probably would if they were consulted, if they had the right to say no. But if the federal government want to put an expressway through, they wouldn't have any say. They'd just nationalise the land. But transmission, we've allowed it because of this politicisation of climate to become politicised. And the offshore wind industry, in my view, is next to dead in Australia. Like, it's absolutely the backbone of England, Scotland, Germany, Netherlands, Denmark, China. China's putting in 80% of the world's offshore wind right now, but don't worry about China. Germany's been doing it. But it's been politicised to the point where we're probably never going to do offshore wind now. Now, Lily Dimrosi is still trying to push through with that, but you really need supply chains locally. You can't build one offshore wind. You've got to you've got to build 5 of them. So transmission, the beauty of the energy transition is that Australia is leading the world, and the cost of transmission's doubled, trebled, quadrupled in the last 5 years. Battery prices have halved or gone down 70 or 80% in the last 5 years. They're continuing to go down. So if the price of one's doubled and the other's halved, you're probably going to use more of the other. And that's what Minister Bowen's doing with his home batteries. But for every home battery, we're building a utility scale battery, 10 of them, and we're leading the world. So batteries do substitute for transmission. We probably need half the transmission we thought we needed 5 years ago, according to the AEMO integrated system plan, and we'll probably halve that number again because we just can't get it built. And if we build it, it's so expensive, it's not worth having. So we do need it. We do need to have interstate transmission. We do need to have pumped hydro storage so that grid reliability, but we need a lot less than we thought we did 5 years ago, even with EVs and data centres. So at the end of the day, economics have changed. Let's change the plan, and that's what AEMO is doing in their integrated system plan. We need more rooftop solar, more consumer energy resources, and as you said, in 11 months, it's nothing short of staggering. When Australia wants to move, the Australian consumer is voting with their wallet. 415,000, you quoted, households have voted with their wallet and spent each of them $20,000, $30,000. Well, the willingness is there to embrace the opportunity for self-interest, protection from being gouged by the latest fossil fuel war.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty strong impetus for action, self-interest. And, that has been the opportunity that many people have had. My brother-in-law is the least EV interested person in the world, but he's gone from having none to having a huge roof full of solar because he suddenly realised he can get his electricity prices down, and now he's one of those people constantly checking his phone app and showing off about how much he's generating at any... But it's the price.
It worked.
It worked.
It's not the 10% we need to bring. It's the dirty, unwashed middle of Australia, because everyone votes, and we need to bring everyone. And not everyone's as passionate as I am or you are about the climate. Intergenerational equity. They're trying to pay for their rent or their food or their education of their children. But if we can, to me, the beauty of the battery scheme is it's lowering prices of power for everyone, and EVs will do that even bigger.
All right, you mentioned data centres, because that's, I guess, the big bogey on the horizon, the electricity that we may require for data centres, which seem to be going up at a rate of knots in the capital cities, not sufficiently regulated as yet, I would argue, given the challenges they're going to provide us with on water. I know people are looking at the water requirements, but the energy requirements are really significant. Have you got any thoughts about that?
I just had a beer before coming here, admittedly zero alcohol beer, across the road with a data centre operator, builder. And he's doing it on the top, he's probably here now, on top of quarries. In other words, using wastewater to power it and then cleaning up the wastewater, but building batteries behind the meter solar, using industrial wastelands, quarries, we've got them all around Australia. It's a rather interesting idea, but maybe I'll answer it a different way. The federal government's taken a lead, and this is where our federation needs to be stronger. Industry Minister Ayres has said he is going to subscribe to a national data centre policy. Now, he's got to convince his state counterparts to do it because ultimately they're the ones approving it. And we've got New South Wales being played by the data centre operators who are all big global players with trillions of dollars of capital, and it's a gold rush. And so New South Wales Premier is fighting with the Victorian Premier. If Victoria puts any conditions on, New South Wales doesn't, or vice versa. We need a national convention. We need to make sure that they're in the regions. We need to make sure that there is sharing of the benefit and that the data centres are part of the solution. I believe they can be because it's a gold rush. Data centre owners have trillions of dollars of capital. I'm not making that up. Trillions of dollars of capital. If you ask them to spend $2 billion to power with firmed renewable energy their data centre as a condition of their approval, they'll do it tomorrow. They'll bitch about how long it'll take to build the wind, but they'll do solar in a year, they'll do batteries in a year, they'll have to wait for approval. So the government has to accelerate approvals. But they can be part of the solution and they can drive accelerated decarbonisation if our governments hold firm against the very powerful financial vested interest. But if someone walks in with $1 trillion in their pocket and talks to one of our ministers, I think the minister's going to cave.
Well, I was talking to Dalee last week about this. So she's a independent member for Fowler in Western Sydney, and her local government area is currently in the process of approving 2 data centres, which they've been promised that will bring employment, but the figures seem to suggest that the employment is only in the building phase, and then they'll disappear again. But the council has the ability to approve these or disapprove these, and councils are typically a bit cash poor, and it doesn't take much. And I was really concerned to hear that I think it's Ashfield Council has these 2 massive programs that it has the ability to decide, and it didn't seem like it was up to the state government at all.
Yeah, we've got 3 levels of government, but the New South Wales government's brought in accelerated projects of national or state significance. If they're over $1 billion, they've got state approval. Okay. So those data centres are smaller than that, thankfully. So the council, but as you say, our councils are poor. The state governments are poor. New South Wales has got as much debt as Victoria does. They're seeing this as a gold rush, and the trouble is we've got to make sure the money doesn't infect our politics, but it will. It invariably does.
Yeah, fair enough. The capacity investment scheme, can we talk about that? It's one of the federal government's biggest pieces for expediting large-scale energy projects. How well do you think it's working at this point in time?
Yeah, I hosted a panel of 5 finance experts about a year ago, and all 5 of them, and most of them work for the federal government in various guises, but they were the biggest super funds in Australia as well, one of the biggest banks in Australia. So I had 5, all the different players. The best they could come up with is the jury's still out. Now, a year later, the jury's still out. We still haven't got any projects, or almost any projects, in the capacity investment scheme to final investment decision and into construction. It is Minister Bowen's flagship scheme. He is still very optimistic, but I follow the money, not what politicians say, and I would give it a C- if I was being nice. You'll probably hear that. David Leach might be more a F-. But at the end of the day, and I'll be fair, they're trying to do 5 or 6 things in one go. They're trying to look after First Nations. They're trying to do local content. They're trying to say, do you have grid access? They're trying to work out the lowest cost to consumers, because the higher the price, the more we all pay for our electricity, and our children all pay because they don't have a battery or rooftop solar. And local content, I'm haggling with the industry minister for local content on wind towers, and Minister Bowen turns around, you push the price of wind up even more, it'll be even less financially viable. So the trouble is you're trying to do 6 policies with one initiative, and it's failing. So Minister Bowen's thinking it's been speculated that he's looking to re-tender the wind ones. I would strongly recommend he do that. We need some wind. We can't just power our economy with solar. Wind is beautifully complementary to solar, but the cost of wind is 2 or 3 times that of solar for onshore. Offshore wind's 4 or 5 times. So let's go with a cheaper option. But wind is complementary, as is transmission. It's windy in Queensland when it's not windy in Victoria, or vice versa. You need that some grid transmission. It's a public service. So, yeah, I was being nice, a C-. We've got to get some projects to final investment decision into operation. If that means going back and re-tendering quickly, speed is important. We just need to get some generation built, because the power plants, the coal plants, are going to fail. They're beyond their end of life. I mean, again, Angus Taylor has a problem with mass. He thinks coal plants last for 50 years. They don't. The average coal plant in Australia is closed at 43 years. That's a 43-year life. Most of our coal plants are pushing well over 40. They're pushing towards 50. Grid reliability goes down each and every year. Now, that's great for batteries, and that's why we've got a battery boom, because the battery operators will make out like bandits every time a coal plant goes down. But we've got to build generation, and as you mentioned, data centres bring even more power demand. EVs bring even more power, electricity demand. We've got to build not just replacement capacity, but new capacity. It's got to be generation, not just batteries.
This is a question without notice, and I'm not sure if it's fair, but do you have any feelings? There was in the budget 3 weeks ago, I think people were surprised to see some restrictions around, some foreign investment in renewables, and so there were a few things that started trickling into the office when people actually looked at the fine print of the budget. Well, they said, hang on, have you seen this? Or actually, I've seen this and I'm really concerned about that. How much of an issue do you think those changes were?
I will defer to Richie Merzian and the Clean Energy Investor Group. They're a lobbyist for the 24 biggest renewable energy developers in Australia. I love them because I love renewables, and we need that to drive permanently a livable planet and our power prices down. But at the end of the day, there's a Chinese saying, you don't break the old, or build the new before you turn off the old. Yeah. So I've just mangled it. It's rather sensible. Could
you give it to us in like Mandarin or?
No.
No,
I'm a finance guy, not a linguist.
But it makes sense. Yeah.
We need the coal-fired power plants until we don't need them. You don't need them when you've built enough replacement capacity of whatever it is. And if it was nuclear, we'd be waiting till I'm dead, like 25 years from now, before any nuclear is built. So that's just a furphy, it's a distraction. We said we're not going to go there. But we need to build new capacity. We need to build it fast. And I've managed to lose your question. Foreign investors. So why am I going on about that? 70% or 75% of all the new firmed renewables built in Australia in the last 5 or 10 years were funded by foreign investors. Now, here we have Minister Bowen and Treasurer Chalmers and the Prime Minister saying we need a lot more renewable investment. And yet we've just whacked 75% of all the investors in Australia in renewables with a tax that they didn't have yesterday. And Chalmers goes, we'll give them a 4-year grace. We'll only tax them at 15% for 4 years. By 2030, it'll be 30%. But by the way, when they invested 20 years ago, it was 0. And he said, by the way, we're going to do it retrospectively for 20 years. Now, we talk about sovereign risk. Every time I hear Kevin Gallagher, the CEO of Santos, talks, he squeals sovereign risk if anyone mentions a gas tax. But that's not sovereign risk. That's looking after Australia's sovereign interests. And Albo's unable to do that because people like Kevin Gallagher squeal about it. But here we've just had our federal government whack foreign investors who are investing in the good stuff, and yet we haven't done anything to actually allow our domestic. We've got the 3rd or 4th largest capital pool in the world, $4.5 trillion of capital, and it's all on the sidelines because your future, your super rules effectively preclude our domestic super from investing in renewable energy infrastructure. And we've been lobbying Treasurer Chalmers for the last 3 years to change the Your Future, Your Super rules to allow our 4.5 world-leading superannuation system to invest in renewables. Chalmers is stuffing around on that, having the 3rd inquiry on that, but he's managed to whack the foreign investors who are investing in Australia before he's solved the problem to unlock an alternative investment. So Should we tax them? Yes. Should we do 20 years retrospectivity? I think anyone would squeal if the government whacked them with it. Oh, by the way, we're changing the tax on trusts and we're doing it 20 years ago. Anything you did for the last 20 years is now taxable, but you think foreign investors aren't going to squeal sovereign risk on that? Kevin Gallagher will squeal, but he squeals all the time because you touch his bonus. Sorry, that's probably defamation.
It is interesting, actually, and it didn't get a whole lot of coverage in the media.
It's a bit esoteric, and people go...
But it's kind of important, really, you know.
We need more investment, not less.
Yeah, it's been an interesting few weeks, you know, just dealing with the fallout from the budget on these sorts of things which have sort of bubbled up and people desperately trying to get some oxygen, some airspace to talk about these things which are really, really important, but which haven't captured the same amount of attention as people making memes about Albo owning 47% of their business. It's an interesting sort of a time.
So I'm just going to repeat, it's a 20-year retrospective tax on foreign investment in infrastructure that we desperately beg them to do because we can't allow our domestic investors to invest in it. Like, talk about two own goals in the middle of a climate crisis, but let's worry about affordability while the planet burns. As you said, in a year's time, when the bushfires come back, we'll get a very stark reminder, and it'll only get worse until we actually all collectively invest in permanent solutions.
Yeah. And on that happy note, I shall move to the iPad. Okay, that's a good question. Thank you, Peter. I should probably warn you that in this part of the world, at least 2/3 of men are called Peter.
I was in an event last week where there were 4 Tims and 1 Tina, and we're all the presenters. So the moderator said, look, 60% of the presentations are coming from Tim or Tina today.
Nice.
But, I'm from Sydney, not from Melbourne.
Yeah, no. In Kooyong, all the good people are called Peter. What are some of the practical products and services that could be used to help those, like renters, who are not able to invest in EVs, batteries and solar?
I'll leave that more to lighter footprints because there are a lot of solutions. But I was at this conference with 4 Tims and a Tina, and one of the Tims mentioned that there is a battery that you can plug into a power point in any apartment in Australia. Oh, that's right, you're not allowed to because the rules don't allow you to, but you can do it in Germany. And you can plug in solar balcony. So you literally go to your Aldi or go to your Bunnings, you buy your solar panel, you hang it on your balcony, and every second balcony in Germany's got one. But they've also then got a battery. But in Australia, that battery is illegal because it damages the building insurance. But if the federal government were to rule that that battery is like a computer or a kettle or any other appliance, if they said the battery was an appliance, you could just plug it in. It's available today. There's an Australian firm, actually, that's right, it wasn't a Tim, it was the CEO of a company building those batteries. And he said he's got massive orders for it. They're 3.5 kilowatt batteries. You can just plug them in. You can plug your solar on the balcony. So we could have that solution tomorrow. Now, fireys will say, oh, but hang on, there are a lot of batteries, lithium-ion battery fires, but it's your imported low-quality scooters or broken batteries where it's not your EVs that are burning any more than last time I'm driving around with a tank of flammable petrol in my car. I've still got a 15-year-old internal combustion engine. I'm waiting for my EV. But, sorry, I digress. There are fire issues, but I don't think they are... the quality of the batteries I'm seeing in China, like I watched literally the best battery, it was a lithium battery. I went to their product launch. It was 14 hours they burnt a 20-foot container of lithium-ion batteries at 1,400 degrees Celsius, and they had 3 other boxes around it within 15 centimetres, and all 3 other boxes were still working, and they burnt it, literally open door, fully charged. It was the first battery test in the world of that standard. The quality of these batteries that China is now building, put aside the No, I won't go there. The national security issue, but at the end of the day, the batteries are unbelievable. The technology they build, that's one of the reasons I haven't bought an EV. I know the battery I'll be buying in 6 months' time will be about 5 times better than the one I would have bought 5 years ago. It's staggering.
Yeah, I bought that one.
Yeah.
Not really, 2 years ago. But no, it's true. It's one of those things where you think, well, I'll just wait because I know the technology is improving so quickly. Well, I have asked Chris Bowen about the solar for balconies, and it is being looked at. You know, people do. It's certainly one of the things that people are thinking about for renters as a potential option. But it's just obviously many of the sort of strata sorts of people are worried about fires or safety and things like that. But
so a community battery would then be an alternative where when Minister Bowen rolls out his 3 free hours of solar, he should prioritise that community batteries go to renters. And so if you're in a rental apartment and you rent a 10th or a 20th of a community battery, you can then use your 3 free hours of solar, charge your community battery, it's a virtual battery, and then play it back at night. So in other words, if we change the rules to say, well, you don't need the battery sitting on your living room and you don't need the solar on your balcony, you can get it for free. That's what the 3 free hours of solar, but it's in the middle of the day when solar's plentiful and we're actually curtailing it because we don't have enough storage. But renters should be given access to community batteries because I am rich, I own my own home, I've got my own battery, but my children don't, so they could rent the community battery. So Minister Bowen's rolling out community batteries. The grid operators don't really like them because they love regulated assets and they love monopolies and they love being able to charge and maximise their profits because they're for-profit entities, of course. National public infrastructure, for-profit, doesn't quite work. But anyway, community batteries with the right regulations could actually mean you don't need that plug-in battery. But if you could literally go down to your Bunnings, buy a battery and take it home and plug it in as a renter and start saving the way I can because I own my own home, that would solve the problem for a lot of people. And that unit, I was told, was $3,000. Right? It's cheaper than my home battery. Yeah. That's Australian, 100% Australian made. It'll have Chinese cells in it, but Australian manufactured assembly.
Great. Carbon price. What impact would a price on carbon have on the rate of transition to clean energy if were we to impose a price on carbon?
I do work with Rod Sims. He's probably more aggressive on carbon pricing than I am. He's got more of an economic lens as a finance lens. But to think that our finance community, where they are all, the biggest super funds in Australia are all managed by one law, the sole purpose test. They maximise the risk-adjusted return for their investors. The sole purpose, that's their legal obligation. They're not allowed to think about other things. Now, that's not banks or insurers, that's the asset managers who manage everyone's superannuation unless you're self-managed super. So the sole purpose test says that they're not going to invest in saving the planet because that's not in the sole interest of their beneficiaries because they were worrying about the planet in 100 years or 50 years or sooner, much, much sooner. But at the end of the day, our finance sector is one of the most powerful and it should be one of the biggest drivers of the energy system transformation in Australia. But because Tony Abbott repealed the carbon price, our finance industry a decade later is sitting on its hand. The fossil fuel industry won. Who asked Tony Abbott to repeal the carbon? Look, who won? Who makes more money now than they've ever made before? The fossil fuel industry. So, yeah, we need the carbon price is critical for a market economy. Now, let me put it in another language. Let's put aside the word carbon. Let's call it pollution. Has anyone heard of the free market principle, polluter pays? Now, carbon pollution. Someone picked me up 6 months ago on LinkedIn. I always call it carbon emissions because emissions trading schemes. But they said, look, can you just call it what it is? It's pollution. Everyone here would accept polluter pays. And you either don't pollute or you pay the penalty. And the penalty should be enough to disincentivise you to do it, not a tenth of the price of the pollution you're causing, which is what our ACCU price is. It should be the fair price, and enough to incentivise you not to do it. But we don't have that. So we're saying we're a market economy. All these supposed liberal politicians are saying, let's leave it to the free market, but then let polluter not pay. Well, that's not leaving it to the market, that's rewarding the polluter. And worse, we go one step further, we then subsidise them to keep polluting because we subsidise $11 billion a year of diesel. It's just stupidity, as you said, I'm with you on that. But yeah, polluter pays. If we actually had a price on carbon, get out of the way and the market could solve it tomorrow. No, it wouldn't solve it perfectly, it'll solve it because the life of a coal plant or a gas plant. But as we heard today, like Snowy Hydro CEO in the AFR saying, look, I actually don't want to turn the Kurri white elephant, the diesel-powered gas generator that I was forced to build by Angus Taylor. I could say Josh Frydenberg, but it was Angus Taylor.
No, I'll say Josh Frydenberg.
Josh was the treasurer. Josh was the energy minister. Anyway, that's the white elephant. Now the CEO doesn't want to turn it on because he goes, I'm going to lose money.
Yeah.
And that's without a carbon price. But anyway, we're going a little off topic. But put a carbon price on and get out of the bloody way. The government shouldn't be building the industry. It's not about nationalise everything. It's about set the right rules and get out of the way and let finance solve the problem.
Agreed. This is a tough one. It's from Anonymous. All of this is easy to talk about in Kooyong. What would the keys be to combating misinformation in those places where renewables and transmissions are actually going to be built?
Yeah, I read a interesting article. It wasn't even the Australian. It was a farmer going, look, I don't care about that science crap, that climate crap. But at the end of the day, I do care about making money, and so I want wind. This was a Queensland farmer, and he goes, I've got 11,000 acres or some obscene amount, and he goes, they want to build wind farms, bring it on. I don't care about that climate crap. I want it because I'm going to get $35,000 per wind turbine, and they're offering to build 11 turbines. Do the maths, and that's for 30 years, so he's going to be made an overnight millionaire the day they build them. And he goes, it's drought resistance for him. Like, he's a marginal cattle farmer. I don't think the cows are going to care about a few wind turbines. They'll probably stand in the shade when it's hot.
I was going to say.
But what he's saying is it drought-proof. He said if he had that 5 years ago, he wouldn't have had to sell off all of his cows in the last drought because he would have had the money to... And I don't care about that climate crap. That's how he starts the conversation. And it probably was the Australian. They'd write that sort of crap.
It wouldn't have been crap. It probably would have been a bit stronger.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to be polite. I mean, it's Kooyong. It's not Sydney. Okay.
It's true, actually. I mean, I think that's a very, some of the most, the people I've spoken to who have been farmers who are experiencing a drying planet and, loss of output from their farms and things like that, they're the strongest, because they're seeing it in front of them. They're seeing the immediate impact of climate change. They've been the strongest proponents of change. But, gosh, the negativity, I mean, in terms of misinformation, I would just talk about the constant misinformation from mainstream media. It's extraordinary, sometimes what you see again and again and again, the language used around it and the dumbing down of what should be, serious and important conversations. I find it very, I think what we need to do is to, legislate against for truth in political advertising and for 100%. Media protections in this country.
I might return on you get me on misinformation, disinformation. I deal with that every single day, but you're right. And every time I wander around Parliament House, which at the moment's quite regularly, like Sky TV in every single... Do you have your TV on in your room? You probably have to know when the votes are coming.
Just for I have one of the chambers on, but it's a really interesting one, the Sky thing. I mean, I don't engage with it at all, but if you're in a rural or regional setting, that's your free to air.
Free to air.
And it's changing the way people
And Rupert Murdoch owns that for a very deliberate misinformation, disinformation. So it was lovely to see Farmers for Climate Action put out a press release this morning, and they quoted 6 farmers from 6 different states across Australia, and they all talked different angles as to why they want the government to help them solve the problem. One of them was the upfront cost for tractors is too high. So let's get we subsidise batteries for homes, let's subsidise the tractors so that we can get the learning by doing, get the supply chains established. But 6 different farmers across 6 different states gave 6 reasons why they want action on climate. But it's not about blaming the farmers, it's about enabling them to solve the problem. They totally understand it. I do think there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation in there, but most farmers get it. They might be conservative, but they're all about intergeneration equity. Their farm is going to go to their children, and they care about the land more than any of us. So if we're putting transmission lines on them, pay them appropriately. If we're putting a wind turbine, I'd love every farmer who's got a wind turbine to actually be free of their non-disclosure. Free of their non-disclosure requirements so they can brag to everyone how much money they're getting. But they're conservative, they don't want to because they know their neighbour's not getting it.
Right.
So New South Wales has brought in rules that, I got a pine plantation forest out near Oberon, and it's right next to state forest, so they're building the biggest proposed wind farm in the world, 2 kilometres south of my property. I begged them to come and put 5 turbines on my property because that would have been $150,000 rent a year for 30 years. They go, no, you've got 5 neighbours all with houses on your property. You might love the turbine, so we've got to pay $2,000 per turbine per house for 30 years. Add that up, my neighbours were going to get more than me. And I go, that's fine by me. They go, yeah, but it ruins the economics for our project. We'll build it in the state plantations where there's no biodiversity, there's no wildlife because it's dead, it's monoculture. It's a great place for a wind farm. And they said, by the way, we've got the best grid transmission cable already in place. But to finish the punchline, to the point you made, everyone in my shire, Oberon Shire, gets $100 off their retail electricity bill every year for 30 years from that one wind farm, if it gets approved, $100 a year for everyone in the Shire, not everyone within 10 kilometres. And the Shire's not a wealthy Shire, that's a lot of money. I got them to add it up, it was $260 million of community benefits over the 30-year life of that project, and yet we got 5 or 10 ratbags who are campaigning against it. And so they're campaigning against their neighbours getting $260 million from one wind farm. So at least put a number around how much you really hate turbines that much. And you'll never change those 5 people's minds, whatever they accept the flickers, who knows what they think. But the way I said it to them, when they wouldn't build them on my property, I was really annoyed, but I can live with that. Self-interest. I got no vested interest because they wouldn't build them on my property, but they said many of your neighbours have done it, and the wind farm's now going to be 2 gigawatts, like 2,000 megawatts. It'll be the biggest wind farm in the world. Outside of China and India, and it's all existing grid transmission. And I forgot why I interrupted you. Oh, there was the $100 a year, plus $60,000 a year for local community services, and not just sponsoring the local football club, sponsoring, and they do a community hall where the community votes what are they going to spend the money on each 6 months.
Wow.
It's a lot of money. Now that's been mandated in New South Wales. These guys, Tag Energy, I'll call them out, they actually proposed that 5 years ago. 2 years ago, New South Wales was so backward on wind, like we made Victoria look really bloody good. But the Minns government eventually changed the law and said we want good community benefits to flow back. If you're within 2 kilometres, which is why my property was screwed. I got a big property, but 5 neighbours were within 2 kilometres. Every one of them would have got $10,000 a year compensation for 30 years.
It's extraordinary. It's a massive investment.
Drought-proof their farms.
Yeah, amazing. Okay. What will it take to turbocharge the rollout of EV charging networks?
I do think it's going to be a public good. It's easy. I look at China, and I was reading about CATL this morning, as you do, the biggest battery company in the world, and their commitment to building battery swapping infrastructure and massive rollout of, like, the numbers are thousands, like 5,000 fast chargers, 900 battery swap centres, all by the end of this year, just to accelerate the deployment of EVs. Now, they've got a really high population density. They've got a forward-looking government that doesn't have to worry about being re-elected every 2 weeks, and they actually are building energy security for their nation. But Australia's different. My farm, I can't have an EV. There's another reason, because I don't have a house on my farm, so I've got to be able to do a 6-hour round trip every time I go to my property, and no EV is going to do that, and I don't want to actually have to stop for half an hour on the way home to charge the car. I could charge it from my solar at home, but I've got to get home. So up until now, I've been waiting. Range anxiety was real. I don't go to my farm that often, but there's no house there to go, and it's bloody cold in winter. But
It sounds lovely.
It is great for camping, but we need the enabling infrastructure. That is a public good, and we need to build not two. I did do a road trip with Nicolette Buller down to Canberra about 2 years ago, and we got stuck at Goulburn, like the fast chargers at Goulburn, but there were 3 of them. They're all Tesla. Like, okay, I don't want to swear, but Elon Musk, don't mention him, but Tesla's got brilliant technology, but they were building fast chargers, but we need banks of 10 or 20 of them, because we're going to have a absolute flood of EVs in the next 12 months as everyone's trying to protect themselves from Trump's latest inanity or crime or whatever you want to call it. And we need a lot of fast chargers. So that's the enabling infrastructure. I'd put it to the government, let's save $50 billion a year off our terms of trade. That's probably worth a little more than $40 million, which is what Treasurer Chalmers put in this budget. You dumped on it. I'm a little kinder. He did put 40 million on for fast charging, but it probably needed to be 4 billion.
Just a quick poll. Who in this room has been stuck at Goulburn waiting for a charger? I certainly have, I think. Oh, actually, I'm a bit disappointed. I would have thought it would be more. But I think range anxiety is one of the really significant things, and no one likes spending 3 times longer trying to get to a place, and if you're going, to Sydney or to Adelaide, and with the influx of cars, 15% increase in sales just in the last quarter, I think, it's going to be a real challenge for us. We do need to work on that. I'm not sure if this is one for you or not, Tim, but I'll try it. 6 people have given it the thumbs up. So the Grattan Institute's talked about the fact that the gas network and the decline of gas usage in this country, which is down, I think, 16% in the last year alone, I think last year, could be even less than that, is meaning that those people who remain on the gas network are going to have to pay more and more for it over time, and they're going to be people who can probably afford to do so the least. Do you have thoughts about that, about the need to plan for those changes over time?
Yeah, I'm a fan of Lily D'Ambrosi. She's got a gas substitution roadmap. She's had one for a couple of years. I can't get New South Wales to replicate it, and New South Wales imports 95% of our gas from Queensland and South Australia. Like, surely we should be building it. Like, the industry's squealing, our industry's closing every bloody month. We lose another industry because gas is not available. There's no certainty of supply, and we import it all as a state. Yet we still don't have a gas substitution roadmap. We're still allowing new houses to be built with gas connections, and yet the industry, like BlueScope, squeals all the time, give us subsidised gas. Well, hang on, why don't we have a gas substitution roadmap like Lily D'Ambrosi brought into Victoria years ago, and actually get off the addiction to methane gas in the areas where it's most sensible, which would be start with housing. ACT's done it, Victoria's done it. Why hasn't New South Wales done it? Why haven't we done it federally? Like, let's just work out, let's prioritise, like, dare I say it, I'm actually almost advocating for a methane-based direct reduced iron plant, because we can't, green hydrogen's still 5 or 10 years away from commercial viability. There are some hydrogen experts in the room, so I'll say 5 to 10 years away. China will get there within 2 years, and no kidding, they're going to be there. But we'll be 5 or 10 years behind them. But in the meantime, I want to value add our iron ore. We export half the world's iron ore, and we do precisely zero value add of our hematite iron ore in this country. That's criminal, and it's stupid, because it means in 10 years' time China won't want our hematite iron ore, and the WA government gets $10 billion a year of royalties from iron ore. Unlike the gas industry, the gas cartel, the iron ore industry actually pays $10 billion of royalties. The PRRT, Petroleum Resources Tax, 1.6, average is pathetic. And that's a bigger industry than no, it's not. It's half the size of the iron ore industry. But BHP pays $10 billion tax a year. Like everyone knows, I'm not a big fan of BHP. On their climate walk back, watch ABC Four Corners, but they're the biggest taxpayer in Australia. They pay $10 billion corporate tax in a year, more than Exxon's ever paid in their life in Australia. But I've probably gone off topic there. What was the question?
The need to plan for the decline of the gas network and
plan
how we're going to work for it. So have a plan. Yeah. Last question. Sure. Yeah. Okay.
So we need a gas substitution roadmap for Australia. We do need gas for Port Kembla's blast furnace to keep it ticking over for another 20 years, because they've locked that in. They've just spent $1 billion on it. So let's prioritise heavy industry that we want to protect in Australia, so that we're not totally dependent on China. But that means deprioritise the areas where it's bloody obvious to get off the gas, and let's make sure that the renters and the poor aren't the ones left holding the can, because the death spiral of the gas utilities. But last comment. You know who owns most of the gas network in Australia? The Chinese government. Gemina is owned by the Chinese. I'm not going to worry if we hurt them. They bought the gas network. They own Gemina. That's all public information. China State Grid, I'm meeting with them in 2 weeks' time. I work with them. They don't pay me anything because I can't take money from the Chinese government. I wouldn't. But they own the gas network, a lot of the gas network in Australia. If they made a bad decision 20 years ago, they can live with it. They're the richest nation in the world.
Interesting, I did not know that. Thank you, Tim. That's a very happy thought to be left on. Thank you very much.
I'm just thinking of this.